Hello. After successfully processing the scan we had of a last, what I want to do in this next video is move on to processing the data from the 3D scan of a foot. Again, in order to do this, in order to manipulate the file, you're going to need a copy of MeshMixer on your computer. Link to the download is below, and in order to process it into a file type that we can then CNC, you're going to need a copy of Cura. Again, the link is below in the description. They're both free to download at the time of recording this video. This is test 2 with regards to using a 3D scanner to help you make a last. What you need to understand about this scan is that this is a scanner of my foot while stood on a chair. The reason I'm stood in a chair is to try and get a flat sole to it. The problem with scanning your foot in this means is that there isn't actually a base to the model. So what we're going to do is look at a few ways to clean up this scan, see if we can get a last from the data. So if you were going in this way, you'll notice that actually there are some holes in the scan, there are some errors where when scanning we haven't gone round the full heel cup. So what we're going to try and do is repair this model and see how we get on with it. Very similar to the last video, the first thing that we're going to do is click on edit and we're going to separate the shells. Bring the object browser over and we're going to identify which the foot is. Once we've got the foot, again, select all the other files, delete them, and select our object to start with. Once again, what I'm going to try to do is square up this object as best as I can. That way we know we can get a flat base with the plane cut later on. So I'm going to go into edit, transform, and start rotating it so it looks roughly flat there from a front view. I'm going to go into a side view and try and flatten out a little bit that way. Then I'm going to go up here again and try to jump into a top view and rotate it round so that it's reasonably square that way. Let's just check where we start getting errors. We're starting getting a slight error in the right hand plane, so a little bit more playing in the right plane. Let's check our front plane again. Slightly, let's just kick him up a touch, and then hopefully we have a fairly square foot. The last thing I'm just going to do is grab him and raise him up above the build area, just so when we're working on this part, when we're working on this model, we're not having it interfere with this build area. And what this build area is a representation of how big a 3D printer would be. I'm going to accept that, and now we have this model. Now obviously this is my shin, I'm going to want to remove some of that. So I'm going to go to plane cut, I'm going to change the direction around, and I'm going to pull it down to just above my ankle. That way, even if I'm doing a high top, something like a Jordan 1, I should have enough model there to remodel it. I'm going to cut and discard half, and I'm going to try to do a remeshed fill. But what you'll notice is actually the fill doesn't remesh. Because this part is open, because this is a surface model, not a solid model, it's actually not going to open up. Now there are a number of different things we can try with this, but the first thing we need to do is actually remove some of this seat, some of this extra model. And you can see the distortion around my toes. In order to do this, I'm going to use the selection tool. And as you see, if you bring it over the model, what you actually get is this bubble. So I'm going to bring the bubble down. I'm going to bring the bubble down and get a model like this. I'm going to bring the bubble down, get a representation like this, and start selecting areas. You'll see the orange area comes up as a highlight. Once it's selected, you can use the delete key on your keyboard to remove it. Alternatively, if you're on a Mac, one of the things you can do is select an area. So I'm just going to get a smaller brush to work around here. Just add in that section. And go up to edit and discard. Now what you'll see is I've missed some areas, but once again these can be quite easily cleaned up by going back through edit, separate out your shells, select the shell you want and delete the other floating objects. This gives us something close to what we want to do. I'm just going to select the object, select this, and quickly just come in here and remove some more of this around the big toe area. Just get that bit out because that bit looks slightly off. Get a little bit more of this area here. A little bit more of this area here. And the heel. Now what you'll see there is an error. And what I've done in error is I have dragged a line. If you drag a line, it will cut an area across your model. It's probably easier to see if I do this. Now obviously I've gone slightly too far to hit Control Z and undo it. So what I'm going to do is just escape out of the tool and redo that selection again. So what you've got to be careful of is actually click and drag the tool, but make sure you're clicking and dragging on the tool itself, because if you click and drag off the part, it will draw a line and assume you want to do a slice. So again, let's just quickly discard those parts. Got a few messy areas. Again, separate shells out, select the objects I don't want and remove them. Now, sometimes with a file, what you might find is that you're lucky enough to be able to go into edit and try to make the part a solid. However, if I were to do this on this part, we're likely just to get a solid cup. We're not likely to get a solid foot. I can try closing cracks, and that will generate small areas to fix it, but realistically I'm going to struggle. Generating a solid, what you'll see is we're getting something quite hideous because it doesn't know what geometry to use around here. Even if we change it to accurate and we turn up our accuracy and our mesh density, which the accuracy is how accurate it generates the faces and the mesh density is how small these triangular polygons are, what you'll notice is that we're getting an error around this heel cup. And actually, for this scan, for this part, I don't think that it's worth continuing modelling this. What you'll see in the next tutorial is actually we're going to use the sculpt tool to smooth out a foot that's been a more successful scan. But for this part, the quickest way forwards, in all honesty, is actually to rescan the foot. You're really going to struggle to fill in these areas. You're really going to struggle to get this heel to be anything representative of what my foot is. And the reason for that is the data was never gathered at the scanning stage. And because that data isn't there, we're simply guessing. So at this point, I'm going to accept the changes, which gives me a nice, white, clear, solid model. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to go back and rescan my foot.